Welcome, brave souls, to Fear File Chronicles, your one-way ticket to spine-chilling stories and terrifying tales. Tonight, we'll be diving into the darkest corners of the human mind with the story. The Soviet Union is responsible for the death of God. The complete story, penned by the twisted mind of South Park, is cool. Together, we'll explore the unexplained and face our deepest fears. But before we begin, if you enjoy trembling and terror, be sure to hit that like button, share this video with your fellow fear fanatics, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click the bell notification so you never miss an eerie episode. Your support truly means the world to us, so feel free to leave a comment below to join the Fear File Chronicles community. Now, without further ado, let's unravel the mysteries of the unknown together as we delve into tonight's fear-inducing story. The Soviet Union is responsible for the death of God. The complete story. My name is Artem Avalov. I never imagined I'd ever share this with anyone not privy to it already. In 1962, a major incident unfolded in the Nenets province of Russia. It remained hidden from the world, thoroughly swept under the rug. I resolved to disclose this event to the public from my deathbed, freeing myself from any repercussions. I don't need to summarize my experience for you. I've maintained a journal, diligently recording every uncanny occurrence during those perplexing months. I've transcribed the relevant excerpts from my journal for your perusal. I need to clarify, I hold no resentment towards any religious beliefs. Just refrain from harming others merely due to their differing beliefs. If they're forced to defend themselves, they will. Without further ado, let's delve into it. Entry 1. The date is September 29th, 1962. I'm with a team of 6, currently traversing towards an area southwest of Korai. We're set to conduct one of the most consequential experiments since the Great Patriotic War. Our commander has meticulously planned this for months, and we won't let any error creep in. Entry 2. It's approximately 5 p.m. We're stationed in an area engulfed by trees. Snowfall drizzles around, causing me to shiver, even bundled in 2 layers of clothing. The experiment commences in 5 minutes. Anticipation and apprehension bubble within me. Opening portals is intimidating, considering we're venturing into the unknown. I ponder whether America is also conducting similar experiments. If they are, I hope we're a step ahead. Entry 3. We've achieved it. When Abramov flipped the switch, the machines hummed, followed by the birth of a light between them. It was as if the air was paper and a light, a hole puncturing through. The portal is open now. It's an unprecedented sight. Entry 4. Our investigator, Galkin, gingerly stepped into the portal. After about 10 seconds, he emerged, describing his experience. English translation: green forests, dark objects gliding through the air. Sirens began blaring. But I returned before witnessing anything further. Before we could interrogate him further, a palpable presence permeated the air. I glanced at the portal. A gleaming white mist was seeping out, ethereal and transparent. I exchanged looks with my teammates, who were spellbound by the apparition. The energy radiating from the figure intensified, almost suffocating. Our commander ordered Abramov to seal the portal. Abramov flipped the switch. The portal began to contract instantly, trapping the mist, which fell onto the snow. The overwhelming presence subsided. The mist, writhing in the snow, gradually ceased its movements. Its lustrous sheen faded, its white hue turned to gray. Entry 5. We were clueless as to what the mist signified in its realm. Galkin's description didn't shed much light. Sirens? Black objects floating in the sky? It seemed like Galkin witnessed a reaction to some significant disruption. We questioned him about any possible markings or signs. He reported seeing nothing of the sort. No tanks, no helicopters, nothing. We requested more details about the black objects. Before he could answer, a brilliant light appeared where the portal had closed. It expanded, replicating the portal's appearance. Inexplicably, the portal had reopened without our intervention. As we watched, baffled, a sinister creature emerged from the portal. It was a horrifying sight, a cluster of rotating rings adorned with eyes. The eyes glared menacingly, and the creature emitted a wet growl. Despite the biting cold, chills ran down my spine. I glanced at our commander. His face was etched with disgust, which swiftly morphed into fear. He withdrew a pistol and fired at the creature, to no avail. It continued to hover unperturbed. I couldn't resist pulling out my pistol and firing at the monster. It had no effect. However, I hoped it conveyed a clear message. The creature eventually receded back into the portal. We should have anticipated this. We had just stumbled upon a parallel world where such entities presumably existed. Abramov attempted to close the portal again, but it resisted. He tried once more, but it remained obstinate. Another being emerged from the portal. This time, it was a humanoid figure resembling a middle-aged man. What was unusual was the red glow enveloping him. His eyes bore a terrifying look of murderous fury. He stood before us and began to speak in a soft tone.
Gentlemen, I'm speaking in a language you can understand, so I can be as clear as possible. I don't know who you are, and neither does the ophonym we sent. But you need to understand, you've just triggered unprecedented chaos.
We don't recognize you either,
Our commander retorted.
but we do know you're an anomaly in our world.
Is that so? I can't glean any information from your spirits, so I'll ask, was your action accidental?
Pardon me?
You know what you did. You're aware of the consequences of closing this portal.
No, we are not. We had an unidentified misty figure intruding our world. We had to close it.
Interesting. I'm just curious. Regardless, we'll take matters into our own hands.
What are you trying to say?
You killed Yahweh. That should say enough. I'll be back with the others soon, so prepare yourselves. This war will be a short one.
He stepped back into the portal. Once he was gone, the portal closed by itself. His mention of Yahweh had me thinking of the biblical figure. He even mentioned an ophonym, a term I'd heard from a priest before. I wondered if the people in that parallel world used the naming conventions of the Bible. What did he mean by Yahweh? I asked the others. Galkin brought up the ophonym. He said he'd heard Christians describe something that sounded like the floating, rotating ring creature we had just seen. I chalked it up to coincidence. The idea we had actually killed God seemed unfathomable. Crazy. The alternate world's inhabitants probably just shared similar names, I reasoned. Galkin approached the transparent gray substance, the supposed corpse of Yahweh, for a closer inspection. Entry 6. We took the substance to a lab and ran some tests. The results were shocking. The substance was made of a material we'd never seen, let alone discovered before. Entry 7. We've spent the last few days conducting experiments on this mystery material. We've found a way to destroy it. This discovery is huge. If we did kill a mystical being and were about to fight a war against its comrades, we needed weapons that could give us the upper hand. The thought of being overpowered by these unknown entities fills me with dread, especially by that damn rotating bunch of wheels. I've committed myself to assist in creating weapons designed to destroy these otherworldly beings. I won't stop working until the weapons are ready for use. Entry 8. The weapons are ready. Backups have been assembled, just in case. Now we wait for our preparation time to run out. When the glowing man returns, we will be ready. Top Soviet commanders have been preparing the Red Army for war in a covert operation called Fighting Angels. However, I'm worried we don't know what those beings have in their arsenal. I can only hope our weapons are strong enough to at least incapacitate them. Entry 9. I was awakened by the shouts of my comrades at 3 a.m. A comrade burst into my room, urging me to hurry.
They've arrived! The war's begun! All their men glow!
I grabbed the necessary artillery. Gunshots and sonic booms echoed from some distance away as I headed for the defense point. As I ran, Flashes of red and white lights off in the distance filled my vision. The cold air bit at my skin, but my blood was boiling with a mix of eagerness, adrenaline, and dread. A soldier ahead of me suddenly combusted into a white light. I ducked behind a nearby bush, scanning for any glowing men. One was approaching, shrouded in a deep red glow. I aimed and fired. The glowing man was torn to shreds, disappearing into the night. Our guns worked, but did we have enough ammunition? To avoid detection, our commanders decided we'd receive news via word of mouth. Deaths would be covered up. Any casualties would be cremated, then honored in secret at a later date. No records or broadcasts about the war were permitted. Civilians aware of the war were sworn to secrecy. Our commanders were doing their best to keep everything under wraps. Day one was chaotic. The glowing men were everywhere. Every couple of minutes, one or two of them would rush by. It was surreal, seeing them torn apart by our bullets. I only had the chance to sleep sporadically. Despite trying to sleep in an underground cellar, I was too alert to truly rest. At times, I would nearly fall asleep, but then I'd hear a rustle and jolt awake again. This cycle continued for 3 weeks before things began to slow down. The glowing men started arriving in smaller groups, their expressions growing increasingly vengeful. All I could do was duck and hope for the best, killing these terrifying beings before they could kill me. Entry 10. Week 3, Day 5. A soldier approached me, exhaustion clear on his face.
The glowing men are cornered. Our men are guarding the portal. They're shooting every glowing being that comes through.
Entry 11. Week 4, Day 1. I woke up at 0400 to a strange, wet growl. Gun in hand, I tiptoed to a spot beside the window. The growling sent chills down my spine. As it continued, I peeked out the window. My heart sank as I saw it floating under the lamplight. The wheels. The floating, rotating wheels, covered with eyes. It hovered in place, ugly and monstrous, reflecting the lamplight. I fired, shattering my window. Steam rose from where the bullet hit the creature, but instead of falling, it started moving towards me. I fired again and took cover out of sight of the window. Steam seeped in through the shattered window. I took deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. In the dim light, I could see the creature's dark silhouette as it floated into the room. I fired again. The creature stopped, but I couldn't tell if it was damaged. My door creaked open, and a soldier walked in. It was my brother. I watched as he combusted into a human-sized white flame, which briefly lit up the entire room and the wounded wheel creature. My heart dropped a second time. This thing can kill, take lives. My brother. Gone in an instant. I fired 3 more shots at the creature. Finally, it combusted into a white flame, the heat almost burning my skin. When the flame died down, all that was left was fear. The glowing men were easy to kill, but these wheel creatures required multiple shots. That would drain our ammunition faster. Sleep is an impossibility right now. For the sake of my life, I'm too exhausted to transcribe more of the journal right now. I'll post more entries as soon as I've transcribed them. I won't be poisoned just yet, so I have time. Here are some more entries from the journal. I estimate I have about 2 days to relay the rest. What's astounding is that the Soviet Union, while experimenting with interdimensional portals, managed to kill God. This incident led to a covert war with an army of radiant entities. Entry 12. On the 3rd day of the 8th week, I was informed that the glowing beings had ceased to emerge from the gateway. The portal had sealed itself, leaving behind a single cryptic letter. The letter reportedly said, "We don't and can't comprehend your world. Reading the minds of your people is a feat beyond our reach," suggesting one of 2 possibilities. Firstly, an alternate Yahweh could be the supreme God of your world, preventing us from accessing your minds and spirits. Secondly, there might be no divine ruler in your world. Yeshua, Yahweh's son, now sits on the throne in heaven, governing both heaven and earth. He has commanded us to turn the other cheek and close the portal to your unpredictable world. I couldn't help but laugh at the ludicrousness of what I had just heard. So, we had indeed killed God. But this couldn't be the end, could it? I lost my brother to God's wrathful angels. If joining him in hell was the price I had to pay, then so be it. Upon returning to the base, I encountered my commander for the first time in weeks. "So, the war ended today, huh?" I inquired, seeking confirmation. "That was one hell of a battle,"
It ended 2 days ago.
responded the commander.
Didn't you get the memo?
"You mean the one about the glowing men being God's angels? And us having killed God?"
Yes. The top brass want to reopen the portal and sweep heaven for its crimes against our union.
"If Jesus indeed honors his word, it shouldn't be too challenging," I countered. I was relieved that the war had concluded. As for the ambitions of those in charge, the idea of re-entering the portal was daunting. The angels wanted us exterminated, and their beasts were nothing short of terrifying, let alone lethal. Despite my apprehension, I was ready to confront it all in defense of the Union and to avenge my fallen comrades. Entry 13. Lunchtime discussions that day revolved around God and the Bible. God was dead. His angels had retaliated by slaughtering many of us, and we were expected to take it all in stride. The real surprise was the fact that God had ever existed. I grew up an atheist, likely a result of Stalin's harsh repression of Christianity. My parents never mentioned religion or gods, making religious practices seem foreign to me. My childhood babysitter had a strong fascination with God, but I never shared his devotion. I don't feel the need to decipher the angel's message when they killed my brother, but I'm certain it wasn't benign. Entry 14. Currently, I'm sitting on my bed, a letter from Khrushchev in my hands. This should be intriguing. Just a while ago, each of us was given a letter. I assumed it had something to do with Yahweh. I opened mine to find a statement from Khrushchev. I read it from start to finish without pause. Here's what it said. "Over the past 2 months, we have sustained significant losses, all because of entities that religions deem holy and good. Upon reviewing the Holy Bible, I discovered numerous instances where God, or Yahweh, committed horrendous acts during his lifetime. Exodus 21, verses 20 through 21. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result, but they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property." Leviticus 25, verses 44 through 46. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans, born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. 1 Peter 2, verse 18. Slaves, in reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. Remember, slave labor was rampant in America, and slave owners justified their actions using the Bible. Take Job, for example. Job, more than anyone else, worshipped God. Yet God saw fit to kill his family and pets, just to prove to Satan that he could torment his followers, and they would still have faith in him due to his grandeur. God was so self-absorbed that he betrayed his own people to feed his ego. 1 Samuel 15, verses 2 through 3. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now go, attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. Even innocent children and infants weren't spared. I used to think the Bible was a work of fiction, written during a time when people routinely killed those related by blood to criminals. However, considering we've made contact with a world where beings similar to those described in religious scriptures exist, I can confirm we were attacked by a cult army led by an egotistical maniac. A maniac who would go as far as annihilating those who disagreed with his beliefs, including those incapable of making rational or irrational decisions yet. We will reopen the portal, march into heaven, and overthrow whoever succeeded Yahweh. We will replace them with one of their victims. Your commanders will provide further details on when Operation Fighting Angels will resume. It appears I'm destined for a realm of horror and uncertainty. Just the thought of the Ophanim sends chills down my spine. Every recollection of them fills me with a sense of impending doom. All I can hope for is to bring them down before they claim my life. Entry 15. I'm about to head out to the portal. A ton of us are going in. This is the weirdest thing we've ever faced. But all I want to do is to make it out of this alive. Entry 16. Well, I can say I made it into heaven, but I'm completely lost right now. A pit formed in my stomach as I neared the portal. We went in a single line, probably the longest one I had ever been in. As I stepped through the light, I nearly froze, but then I saw the other side. A healthy green forest, a beautiful blue sky. I looked to my left and noticed some mountains in the distance. Despite all of that, there was an eerie calmness, like you're being watched by somebody, but you can't figure out where they are. As we walked through the forest, there was tension in the air. I held my gun close to my face and continued to follow behind my comrades. Soon enough, I heard an ear-puncturing boom, then was blinded by a light and pushed back into the soldier behind me. We both fell onto the muddy ground, while the others fired in the direction the boom happened. I rolled into a bush and refocused while breathing heavily. Peeking out of the bush, I noticed two glowing men navigating through the trees. I fired at them both as quickly as I could. I hit one of them, but missed the other. He shot a look of determination in my direction. I fired at him before he could react. I just kept going, looking around, waiting until I was in the clear, then moving through the trees, heart beating fast as I made my way to a good spot to take cover for when I needed to. I had to have traveled miles through that forest before anything else happened. I heard some shouting, followed by multiple sonic booms, echoing throughout the area. My heart sped up even more. I ducked behind a bush and remained alert. I've moved several times and shot countless glowing men. Every single time I'm about to take a shot, I dread missing the target. I would die for my country, but I wish to continue serving Khrushchev and his anti-Stalinist agenda. Entry 17. After a few minutes of rest, I sensed an overwhelming presence. I peeked out of the bush, and beyond the tips of the trees, there was a giant set of rotating wheels adorned with eyes. It had to have been miles wide and miles tall. My heart sank. I watched as a dozen shiny white beings descended into the forest. My view of them was soon obscured by the trees. I had no other choice but to run and make sure I continued contributing to the mission. I jumped out of the bush and sprinted for my life, navigating the dense forest. As I ran, a series of ear-puncturing booms shook the ground beneath me. About 10 minutes of heavy breathing later, I reached a cliff. Off in the distance was a rail yard on the edge of a small town. It was packed with probably hundreds of people. However, I was too far away to be able to determine if they were my comrades. As I watched on, I heard a thud behind me. I turned around and saw a glowing white being with 4 heads. 3 of them looked just like the heads of animals. One of them looked just like a human head. Before I could react, I was knocked unconscious by an invisible force. I awoke in a basement with cracked walls and dented pipes. A man who looked to be in his 50s was sitting in a chair directly across from me. He had shiny hair. My first thought was that I was kidnapped. However, this man wasn't glowing. What did he want? He chuckled.
So you're another one of those soldiers from a different dimension?
He said, yes, I said. Sovi.
I know. I heard of the experiment. The portal closing in on God, and just like that, they died.
I didn't have much to say. My head was still spinning from everything that happened. So I asked him who he was.
I'm the one you're going to help.
Are you an
angel? No. I don't associate myself with people who exclude and kill those who don't follow a torturous, so-called truth.
You're willing to fight with us?
Yes. You guys did something that shattered our universe. The uprising is now going to start 3 years earlier than I'd originally planned.
The man balled his hands up into a fist. Then a patch of blurriness appeared between the man's face and my own. The blurry orb became an image of a white church with a crowd of people huddled around it. I could see movement in the crowd. The devil was showing me a film, or a form of extrasensory vision. He explained it was what was going on all over planet Earth. There were religious people huddled in and around each and every religious building on the planet. Young people, old people, animals too. He then showed me a different vision, one similar to the last, but taking place at the Notre Dame Cathedral. People were clogging the roads. Some were sitting on top of cars.
When God died, the world went into a collective shock. Since then, depression statistics have skyrocketed. People have become agitated, blaming one another for God's death.
He showed me a vision of dead bodies lying in streets of New York City.
If I went to Earth to spread the truth about God, I would be outcasted. God tried to frame me as the evil one, and he did so successfully, just by making me a main antagonist. Then, over thousands of years, using popular culture to frame me as a giant Red Bull with horns, who had a lot of spiritual power, and did all the bad things God did. Wars, natural disasters, cannibalism. God enabled that shit, not me. I've been hoping to one day put an end to God's ruthless vengeance.
I was nothing short of amazed, especially at the notion of him being framed as the villain. I could hardly fathom it, but there I was, speaking to the devil himself.
They follow him, so blindly, like they're unaware he condones torture. They twist it, call it his grand plan, but that's merely rationalizing the torment they endure. They were directed to follow this man, for he is righteous. Everyone simply complied, and he prevailed. Anyone who dared to defy him was eliminated, even though he commanded them not to kill. Some argue that it's justified, but if killing is wrong, it's always wrong. Yes, I've killed, but only because God forced me to, just to feed his vanity. God took 2 million lives. I took 5, not 5 million, just 5. A being with the power of God could resurrect those 5, but Yahweh chose not to.
I still found it hard to accept. The devil was siding with me. I listened as he went on about the New Testament being God's way of gaslighting his followers.
Just because someone apologizes doesn't negate their actions. If you cause trauma, don't expect forgiveness. Then you have those religious zealots who harm others in God's name. They're like brainwashed, abusive children.
His words were striking uncomfortably close to home. I attempted to redirect the conversation towards his referenced uprising. So, if God is no more, who do we bring down other than the angels? The devil gave me a look, an understanding one, unlike anything I had experienced.
Who do you favor? Women? Men?
We've developed a variety of weapons for this patriotic war.
It's fine. Do what you're comfortable doing. You're accepted here.
He began explaining the uprising. Now that God was gone, all that was left was to finish off his army. Easier said than done. There weren't enough soldiers in the devil's army to tip the scales. That was until my army provoked God's angels. Half of them descended upon my reality, and apparently we had slaughtered them all. Unfamiliar with the laws of my realm, their vengeance had lured them here. Now, the remaining half resides in heaven, having nearly wiped out my comrades. A cold dread filled me at this news. However, the devil assured me I had no need for worry. Some time ago, he had persuaded a third of God's army that their revered deity was the devil in disguise, lying and gaslighting them all. The angels believed it and mutinied. They were banished to hell for their rebellion. Apparently, my army had slain as many angels as those who revolted, leaving only a third remaining. So, how many angels did my comrades and I exterminate? I asked.
Over 1 million.
1 million? But what about the guardian angels? There must be billions, especially after the baby boom. How is 1 million a third?
Guardian angels don't partake in God's battles. They watch over children.
And what's Jesus Christ's role in all this?
Jesus Christ was God's human embodiment, not a separate entity. Now we must plan the uprising.
The devil laid out his strategy. In essence, we would infiltrate heaven in groups, then employ guerrilla warfare to disrupt whatever order they had. Afterwards, a vote would be held for a new leader, a new God, a God to establish a fresh order and rectify the havoc Yahweh had caused. But there was a catch, one that wasn't surprising.
There's a 50% chance you'll perish in the uprising, no matter how well you hide.
My heart sank nonetheless. These monsters had to be stopped. I found myself in a position where I could influence the hierarchy of heaven, a notion still largely incredible to me. Regardless, it was my duty. My instincts were urging me to join the battle. I was going to end this. After our strategy session, the devil expressed a desire to show me something. He led me upstairs to his living room. There, he instructed me to peer out the window. When I did, I felt a pit form in my stomach. People were hung from the branches of every tree. The grass was a sickly yellow. Cars were vandalized, left abandoned. Bones littered the rooftops of houses. I shivered and turned back to face the devil. Whose bodies are those? I stammered.
Innocent doctors, psychologists, teachers, men who loved men, women who loved women, those who bore imperfections, women who chose independence and control over their own lives, and bodies, and some of those you see are still alive. The shock, for various reasons, leaves them indistinguishable from the dead.
I'm sleeping in the basement tonight.
I recommend you follow through on that promise.
Who in their right mind would murder innocents? The devil sighed.
At least the Soviets are a necessary shield.
He whispered to himself. Why wouldn't we be?
Oh, no. I meant that differently. No. Anyway, before we do anything else, I'm going to show you a wider picture of the world out there.
The devil led me to his car. A battered, yellow, 4-door. It bore the scars of countless scratches and dents. I was soon swept into a surreal journey. As we traveled down the road, bodies hung from the trees, swaying slightly. I gagged at the sight. The road was scarred, cracked, and filled with holes, some oozing red liquid. We progressed along a main road that should have been bustling with traffic. Yet it was eerily deserted. Minutes later, the devil wordlessly directed my attention to a grim spectacle unfolding in a parking lot. A gang was ruthlessly stabbing someone. Passers-by ambled past, faces as dead as stone, seemingly unfazed by the brutality. Suddenly, the devil slammed on the brakes. A peculiar sight unfolded before my eyes. A dozen small, spiky creatures that spat mini fireballs every 3 seconds were casually crossing the street. One clutched what appeared to be a charred human hand. These beasts were clearly lethal. My heart pounded as we waited for the bizarre procession to pass. Once they moved on, a truck with an unsettling logo breezed by us from the opposite direction. Forbidden meat, it's not immoral. The message chilled me. What could it possibly mean?
If someone comes to your door and invites you to a special restaurant at 5 p.m. without any official identification, close the door.
The devil cautioned. That was the extent of his spoken advice for the remainder of our drive. Beyond his pointing, the silence was deafening. Apart from the horrors I've already described, I bore witness to an unsettling series of scenes. A young man shot in the neck. Boarded up windows on what should have been bustling shopping centers. Crumbling houses and clusters of homeless people. A 5-eyed lamb that stood perfectly still, studying me with a look of sinister determination. The world outside was a chaotic nightmare. Yet it seemed I needed to understand this reality. The same cage where God placed innocent beings also housed deadly creatures, murderers, and unimaginable horrors. Entry 18. Here I am, sitting on what can only be described as two mattresses stacked upon each other in a basement. Animalistic screams echo ominously from every direction outside. A pit of dread gnaws at my insides. I have no idea what could happen to me while I'm asleep. All I can do is hope to wake unscathed. Down here, the windows are devoid of curtains. To shield myself from the horrors lurking outside, I'm going to switch off the lights. Maybe then, whatever hellish creatures roam the night won't see me. I managed to save myself one more day. Here are the rest of the entries. Entry 19. My heart's pounding. I don't know where I am, and I can't say for sure whether I'm safe. After I set out with my group, we bypassed the guard by tunneling under heaven until reaching the sewers. I guess the devil thought the sewers would be mostly unguarded. But once we set foot in them, shouting started coming from both directions. Glowing men. My heart dropped. There was nowhere to duck. I shot at the men, relieved to see them combust. As we trekked through the dimly lit sewers, I took note of how horrible it smelled. It didn't matter so much every time we neared a corner. My adrenaline level skyrocketed. Would there be glowing men waiting for me? Would I live? I resorted to just shooting blindly around the corner. It worked 5 times. Eventually, we reached a drain one of my group members claimed was the first one from the city. She told me to follow behind. Since they could hover, they'd just fly up out of the sewer. Since I couldn't hover, I'd climb. But I'd be guarded in a circular formation. From there, I'd shoot any angel coming overhead. Easier said than done. I need to stop expecting ease of force from my end. Once I climbed up to the street, the sonic booms began. A dozen angels flew above the street. I opened fire for my life, taking out each angel as they flew close enough for me to hit. I barely paid attention to what was happening on the ground around me. All I heard were booms, shattering glass, car alarms, and shouting from all directions. At one point, I needed to take cover. I looked around and saw all the chaos. I ran through a shattered shop window and hid behind a table. An angel landed on the ground. I shot at it. It combusted. As I anticipated, another angel revealed itself. A deep male voice hit my right ear.
Are you from the kingdom of the devil, or are you of God?
I looked to my right and saw an elderly man pointing a double-barrel shotgun at my head. Some shouting echoed in from outside. I looked and saw 2 angels sprinting towards the shop.
Are you of God? Answer the question.
I jumped out from behind the table. The 2 angels' eyes widened. They aimed their guns right at me. I grabbed the shotgun wielder by the hips and pulled him in front of me. He combusted into white flames while I jumped behind his desk for cover. I jumped up and fired at both of the angels. Both of them combusted as well. The war went on for weeks. Those weeks weren't so different from weeks I spent fighting wars in the past. In the middle of week 4, I woke up as the sun began shining and noticed how silent the city was. Perhaps all the civilians had evacuated. During my journey through the war-torn city, I came across a restaurant with shattered windows. I took a look inside. The tables were all lying on their sides. Food was strewn all over the floor. As I looked around, a wet, screeching noise echoed from the sky. I looked up. A giant ophanim was about to fly overhead. My heart sank. I jumped through a shattered window to hide in the restaurant. I knew it took several bullets to take out a small ophanim, but I couldn't imagine what it would take to bring down a giant one. The dreadful sound of the ophanim peaked. But once it began to pass, I took note of a television on the far end of the room. I walked up to it and switched it on, hoping to get some news updates. I flipped through the channels until I found a broadcast showing a giant ophanim hovering above a city I couldn't recognize. Many of the skyscrapers in the city were on fire. Then explosions rocked about 10 or 15 of skyscrapers, taking each of them down. Meanwhile, fires were spreading like crazy across the surrounding forest.
And with that, heaven's final option is hammering the city at the center of hell. The destruction of evil in the name of God has begun.
I watched in horror. Heaven's final option. Innocents are dying. People are being tortured. As I fumed, I heard the sound of somebody stepping on a piece of glass outside. I didn't have time to turn my head before I blacked out. I woke up in someplace dark. Feeling around, I felt a cold, hard-tiled floor. What room was I in? Who captured me? I felt around some more and found a lamp. I switched it on, revealing the room I was in. Torn up papers, photos, and posters were strewn all over the ground. Entry 20. After writing up the last entry, I looked through the torn up papers. Some of them depicted God, Jesus, and different angels. Others were pages from the Bible. I held one of the torn pages and read half of what was on it. I crumpled it up and threw it at the wall. The door creaked open. I jumped, hoping it wasn't one of those glowing men. I grabbed my gun and aimed it at the door. I was relieved to see no glow. She had black hair and looked to be in her mid or late 20s. Her eyes widened.
No, it's okay. I'm on your side. Your fellow soldiers are going to be back soon.
I was relieved, but I didn't know who she was. Was she associated with the devil, or was she someone else entirely? I asked her.
Eve, your fellow soldiers need you.
I know they do, I said. We have creatures to eliminate.
You've already pretty much won the war. Don't let your guard down, though, because the angels avenging God are destroying hell as we speak. Your soldiers need you to help them bring in a bomb you and them call the paracuzma, according to them.
The paracuzma was an atomic bomb we were developing as part of the construction of anti-anomalous weaponry, following the accidental death of God. I told her this, but I also informed her of the fact we hadn't tested it due to our efforts to conceal our war on Yahweh's spirits. We'd only test it in the most dire of times. Times when a war with the West wouldn't sound so threatening. She told me I was ordered by my commander to help bring the bomb into heaven. I told her I needed to see official documentation, even though she already knew of the weapons development project. She led me to a grand room with shiny marble walls, a high ceiling featuring 3 skylights, and a marble-tiled floor. Several of my comrades were engaged in conversation in one corner. Some faces were familiar from previous missions. Others were new. One of the ones I recognized, Dmitri, confirmed the order was legitimate. Then he said we needed to return to the portal. A pit formed in my stomach. Is it still open? I asked. How far away is it from here? Where are we?
Yes, it's still open.
Vladimir replied.
The devil has our backs. Don't worry. Now, get prepared.
My comrades exited the room, leaving me alone with Eve. Eve moved towards a gold-plated chest, situated to my left. She opened it, reached in, and pulled out a stone engraved with words. She placed the stone on the floor before her. What does it say? I queried.
They're the 10 Commandments. Well, 5 of them. The other stone is still in the chest. I'll attend to that one after this.
She pushed her hair back. I was puzzled by her intent until she drew a jagged rock from her pocket, leaned towards the stone, and began to scrape at the first commandment.
I don't know if you've read my story, but I was manipulated into eating the apple. Adam scapegoated me, blamed me for his irresponsibility. He was punished, as was the serpent. So was I.
She started scratching out the second commandment.
That apple contained knowledge, the understanding of good and evil. That's what God wanted to keep hidden. The devil wants to establish a new kingdom with a new leader. Rumor has it, I'm likely to be that leader. If so, I intend to rectify the injustices Yahweh has done.
She moved to the third commandment, etching away at it.
Job declined the position. He just wants to reclaim his livelihood. Adam finally acknowledged his error in blaming me. The devil said he has no ambition to lead, so that leaves me.
Isn't the devil powerful too? I asked.
Not as powerful as you may think,
she said as she began to scrape the fifth commandment.
He's not the antithesis of God. He merely worked for him. At one point, he rebelled against God's oppressive reign. He wields political influence more than divine power. But anyone can be God with certain knowledge.
My comrades returned. I approached them, resolved to end the impending conflict. I locked eyes with Dmitri.
Are you ready, Artem?
He asked.
Yes. This place is surreal. Almost everything here has taken me aback. But if I maintain my resolve to fight and defend, I should be able to stand against those monstrous entities.
My comrades nodded in agreement. Despite the consensus, I had a lingering question. My location. Where the hell was I? I asked my comrades just as I heard the second stone thud onto the floor.
You're in God's mansion.
Vladimir answered.
We eliminated most of the guards and lower-level staff. We hoped to find Noah here as well, but to no avail. However, they had formidable protectors. It took minutes to neutralize some of them, but we succeeded. We can now proclaim God's throne occupied.
Where's the devil? I inquired.
He's in hiding on Earth. He believes we can pull this off, but we also need to get the 4 giant Ophanum creatures to convene at one spot.
Eliminating their guards and staff should do it, I suggested.
That won't suffice. They can be replaced. We need a significant diversion to draw all 4 to the same location. The devil has a plan which he hasn't shared, suggesting it involves a select few.
He hopes, I echoed.
He estimates a 60% success rate. We're dealing with potent entities.
How powerful is the Paracuzma? I asked. Is it comparable to AN 602?
It's twice as powerful, comrade.
Are the devil and Eve going to take shelter?
The devil revealed that he, Adam, and Eve will be in hiding on Earth, observing heaven's central city being decimated.
Well, all right then. Let's proceed.
We must wait for the devil's allies to arrive. Remember?
I understand, I interrupted. We're mere mortals confronting anomalous entities. But now we have more time to deliberate. What do you think the implications of this will be? We've discovered interdimensional travel. Ironically, it led us to this realm. If the West uncovers our actions, they'll use it against us.
We'll see where we go from here.
I nodded in agreement. This did feel like the beginning of something, and I was destined to witness it. I turned towards Eve. She was reaching into the golden box. Both stones were sitting on the floor, all scraped up. Nobody needed those commandments if they were also commanded to do things that contradict them. Eve, I asked. Eve looked at me while pulling an object out of the box. Thank you, I said.
This will all be over soon.
In her right hand, Eve was holding a golden goblet cup. It was adorned with red diamonds close to the rim.
You're welcome.
Eve tilted the cup. A red liquid spilled out onto the floor. Once all the liquid had been poured out, Eve set the cup on the ground. She stomped on it, making a sizable dent. She stomped on the cup again and again and again, until it was pretty much flat. Then she looked at us.
You guys need to leave. This room is off limits now.
All right, let's go,
Dimitri said. We stepped out of the room, leaving Eve to her business. In the lobby, we met up with the devil's comrades. They asked us if we had everything we needed. We each told him yes. With that, we were on our way to finish this. We marched down the deserted main road, past all the abandoned shops with blown-out windows. We were expecting just a few angels, but then that noise came back, that wet growl. I looked up and saw a giant Ophanum slowly appearing in the sky. The clouds separated for it, and I felt terrified. My heart sunk so deep, I froze for a second. Get to the sewer, I yelled. It was our only way out of this one. I couldn't stress it enough either. It had to have seen us out in the open. One of Satan's men ran to the nearest sewer drain and pulled it right off. My comrades and I were told to go first. I sped down there. Then I began jogging south. I looked behind me, seeing my comrades all having made it down, and the devil's comrades floating in. However, only half of them were in the sewer when a blinding white light beamed through the manhole. One of the remaining comrades shouted, telling us to run. I expected it to take at least an hour for us to get to the portal. But 2 hours had gone by, and we still weren't there. The smell was unbearable. I had no idea if a horde of glowing men were about to swarm us, and we only had half the devil's men we were supposed to have. My fear turned into reality when I started hearing familiar shouting echoing from both directions. Great. It happened so quickly. My memory is hazy, but what I can say is, when we heard the voices, the devil's comrades shielded us. Once they rounded a corner out in front of us, It was just deafeningly loud booms for 5 seconds. We waited silently. Then, before we could count to 10, a couple more rounded the corner. They were shot and killed. One of the devil's men, David, signaled for us to remain quiet some more as he walked towards the edge of the intersected sewers. Before he reached it, a black rectangle with moving eyes peered around the corner and shot David with a beam of light. Dread overtook me. There was a fucking Ophanim down here. Why was I so afraid of them? Other than because they were killer creatures. Their appearance was just terrifying. Creepy. All those eyes. I aimed my gun at it, waiting for it to peer around the corner again. Another of the devil's men started towards the spot the Ophanim was. When he neared the spot, he tossed a grenade. It exploded. The Ophanim hovered out from behind the corner while making the worst screech I've ever heard. A third of it had been blown off. It was leaking heavily and was barely able to stay up. It landed on the ground, continuing to screech. I opened fire at it. One shot. It was gone. Eventually, David told us to stop moving. He pointed to a drain up ahead and told us that it was the nearest drain to the portal. This was almost over. Good. But then David told us we were miles away from the portal, so we needed to be quick. As he told us the giant Ophanim were probably hovering around the central city, he got a call on his radio.
This may be shocking, but the devil's plan has failed. We need to get through the portal before any angel finds out what our intentions are.
That couldn't be too hard, right? We climbed out of the sewer. The sweet smell of fresh air was delightful. A great break from the stench. All we needed to do was hurry through the forests. We ran for what felt like an hour. We avoided buildings. We avoided farmhouses. We avoided everything. It was going to take a while to reach the portal, so we discussed hideouts for when we needed to sleep. At some point, we came across a bunker. David told us to get inside. Before I could step in, somebody was shouting in our direction.
"What are you people doing with my shelter?"
I looked to my left and saw a farmer. "Training," I lied. He picked up a shotgun and aimed it at me.
"You guys look like those invaders. Get out of here or I'm calling the police."
In defense, I shot him. He combusted. I stepped into the bunker, where I met up with my comrades. After we woke up, David told us we could pile into the pickup truck in the driveway and proceed with the rest of the trip. He insisted on protecting us on our way there. There were 6 Soviets, including me, so 2 could sit in the front and 4 could sit in the bed of the truck. Seemed simple enough. After breakfast, we made our way to the truck. My comrades and I hopped into the truck while the devil's men took their positions around the truck. Then we began our journey down the roads of the farmland. Adrenaline rushed through me as I thought about the possibility of being found and vaporized by a giant Ophanim. About 10 minutes away from the portal, the truck broke down. We pulled up to the side of the road and made the rest of our way on foot across the calm forest. Some moments into the walk, I saw a white light shining in the distance. That was it. As soon as I glimpsed the portal, I heard it. That resounding, echoey growl. A fleeting look upwards revealed a mammoth Ophanim. Immediately, I increased my pace until I was running as hard as my legs would allow. Exiting the forest, adrenaline surged through me. The Ophanim, once blind to my presence amidst the trees, could undoubtedly see me now in the open grassland. It took a few seconds for me to register that the Ophanim hadn't harmed me, even though it certainly could have by now. Its growl resonated from above, a persistent reminder of its presence. Worse still, I could feel its gaze. It burned through my psyche, a chilling sensation that sent shivers down my spine. Without looking back, I reached the portal and sprinted through. I hardly noticed the shift from the warm climate to the icy blast of snow and freezing air. Just before I crossed through the portal, I felt the unnerving sensation of 4 sets of eyes on me and heard 4 distinct thuds behind me. The air grew warmer. But there was no time to ponder this. I had a mission: secure the arsenal where the Parakuzma missile was housed. After retrieving the missile, I was ordered to stand guard at the portal, a task I quickly took up. While on duty, a horrifying declaration was made to my comrades and me. It didn't change my views on heaven or God. If anything, it made them far worse. It happened abruptly. While scanning the portal, I saw an ashen human skeleton being wheeled out by a man, enshrouded in flames. It was hard to discern where his flame started and his body ended. His presence superheated the surrounding air. The man flashed me a smirk, then uttered in a voice that sent chills down my spine.
Let this be an example of what will happen if any of you step into heaven again. The flame consumes the wicked.
He turned and stepped back through the portal, returning to heaven. The air immediately began to freeze, but my revulsion remained. When my comrades arrived with the missile, it became apparent that the portal was incorrectly positioned to fire the missile at heaven's core. So, we hoisted the machines powering the portal onto a platform and connected it to a helicopter. Once the helicopter lifted the portal high enough, we carefully aimed the missile at the required angle. Within minutes, we sought the approval of 3 of our commanders to secretly launch the missile. Unanimously, they voted in favor of the launch. It was time. Not a minute after the vote, the missile launched. It soared through the air without a hitch, gliding perfectly. It traversed the portal, which closed immediately afterward. The platform was then gently lowered back to the ground and disconnected from the helicopter. We estimated that the city was distant enough to safely observe from the heaven side of the portal. However, the sight of the ashen skeleton still lingered in my mind. I didn't want my comrades to share the same fate. I showed them the skeleton and recounted the flaming man's warning.
What was his name?
My commander queried. I wasn't told, I replied. But the fact we can't recognize him speaks volumes.
And how will we know if we've succeeded?
At this point, I'd had enough. If this was what portal travel entailed, I'd prefer my normal life. A life already teeming with near-death experiences. I'll go check, I declared. If I don't come back out, we probably failed. I approached the portal. Anticipating a wave of excruciating pain, I paused. Driven by the desire to assure my comrades of our victory, I stepped through. The first sight that greeted me was a massive mushroom cloud. The wind from the explosion was still gusting, but it had clearly subsided by the time I arrived. 2 enormous ophanims lay motionless on the ground, engulfed in flames. Their eyes were lifeless, dull, and gray. A third ophanim was floating haphazardly in the air, left to right. It was also ablaze, though not as intensely as the other 2. Nevertheless, the flames were rapidly spreading. For the first time in months, I smiled. The wild beasts were dying. As I looked up in relief, a flame caught my attention. 4 separate fires were spreading across the grassland. Adrenaline coursed through me. The giant ophanim let out an echoing screech, so bone-chilling it commanded my full attention. Looking up, I saw the gargantuan creature hurtling towards me. My heart pounded. I leapt backwards through the portal, tripping and falling back into the snow. My comrades cheered. Despite my survival, panic still clutched at me. I scrambled to my feet and yelled at my commander to close the portal. I relayed what I had witnessed and saw my comrades grimace. The portal was promptly shut before any flames or ophanim debris could make it through. Entry 21. Finally, I can begin a new entry. After the war's end, I took a few days off from writing. The central government plans to conceal the loss of 1.5 million soldiers to avoid escalating tensions with the West. It's uncharacteristic of us, but what we endured was anything but ordinary. It's an incident we don't wish to discuss. The mechanics of it all are simply too perplexing. Entry 22. I never thought I'd revisit this journal. Today's date is November 16th, 1964. Minutes ago, I discovered a film in my basement that wasn't there yesterday. Ready for viewing. The color film began in a grass field, a forest in the middle distance, and a metropolis skyline far off on the horizon. Suddenly, there was a flash of light. When it dissipated, a growing mushroom cloud was visible in the distance. The film ended after a total runtime of 15 seconds. Witnessing the actual explosion was astonishing. That moment was historical for them. The film came with a letter, which read,
Artem, Thank you for assisting my people in the uprising. The new god in power has sealed off my reality from those with malicious intent, so I can finally tell you what I've been waiting for, the right time to say. I knew the right time would be any time after I received your help, as you would have likely taken criticism harshly. What I want you to know is, you and your fellow Soviets need to understand that torture is never okay. I'm not sure if you're guilty of it yourself, but if you are, please change your stance. The Soviet Union is guilty of many of the things it criticizes. Sincerely, the one they call the devil.
All I can say is, I'm glad I started out as a draftee rather than a blunt psychopath. I wonder how things are in heaven, hell, and earth. Hopefully, everyone's in a better place than they were before. Well, my friends, we've reached the end of tonight's chilling tale. The Soviet Union is responsible for the death of God. The complete story, by the talented South Park, is cool. I hope you've enjoyed our descent into darkness, and that you'll carry a piece of the Fearfile Chronicles with you as you drift into uneasy dreams. If our story left you shivering and shaking, don't forget to like this video, share it with others who crave a good scare, and subscribe to the Fearfile Chronicles for more haunting horrors. Remember to hit the bell notification so you're always among the first to know when a new nightmare awaits. As always, we appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Sharing your fears and frights with us truly means a lot, so don't be shy to engage with our sinister community. Until next time, remember to embrace the darkness, for it is within the shadows that our most terrifying stories are born. Good night, and stay scared.